Hello and welcome to the Purpose Pursuit podcast with me, Hannah Miller, and my co-host, Laura McClellan.
Hello.
Hello, how are you? We are matchy.
I know this is very
I
unintentional.
know it is very unintentional. For those that are not watching on YouTube, by the way, you can, or you can go and look on Instagram at any of our reels. Today, Laura and I are both wearing polo necks
With a
with a
short
puffy
sleeve.
short sleeve.
And they're both from Zara.
Yes, they are. Well, actually, mine is Zara charity
Zara,
shop.
yeah,
Sorry,
mine's not,
but
sorry.
yes, we are both matchy. But how lovely yours is.
Yes, but you actually inspired me with yours.
Oh,
You had yours
I
first.
am a style icon.
You are.
Everywhere
you
I go, it's
are.
what people say. I am known for that. Right, a little bit less drivel and let's get focused today.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about a meaty topic
Yeah.
that is a word and phrase that's bandied around a lot at the moment. It's quite in vogue, okay? And that is psychological safety.
Ooh,
I know it sounds very deep, doesn't it?
does.
People talk about psychological safety at work, particularly, but psychologically safe friendships and families. And therefore, when something's in vogue, it starts getting bandied around a lot, and the way we kind of view it can be we can either start to poo-poo it or we start getting wrong ideas about it. Can you think of a time? I mean, I'm hoping I don't make you psychologically unsafe, but I might at times.
No
And by
comment.
asking you that question and you not feeling you can answer suggests that you're not psychologically safe. But can you think of a time when you've not felt psychologically safe?
Does this mean is this the last night?
Well,
No.
you can share that. Shall we do that bit again on the
Yeah.
basis?
Wait, am I actually giving an
Yeah.
example of
Yeah, and it's
real
ridiculous.
life?
Yeah, give you stupid.
Oh, the
bin
bins.
one,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Right, okay.
Can you think of an example of when you might have felt psychologically unsafe?
Yeah, I felt psychologically unsafe last night because
Right. And not at
it's
work.
not at work, no, because David, my husband, went off on a night shift and didn't take the bins out, ready for bin morning this morning. And so I noticed before I was going to bed, and I've never in my life taken the bin out. I've never even put the bin in the bin, ever. Right. So now this is a big thing for me to do. Also, I wash my hands like a trillion times a day.
Yeah.
I hate anything
Dirty, binny.
it is a problem. But this is like I'm actually facing my worst nightmare. And so I had to go and get like the existing bin out the bin, take it outside. It was raining.
You're looking at me like I've never done a
Honestly,
bin.
my heart is like pounding. I had to like take it outside. I was wearing David's like he's got like Birkenstock shoes and they're really big and heavy. So I was flopping around in my pajamas and I filmed myself to send to him while he was at work
To let him know
to
the
let him
trauma
know what he'd done to me.
you.
And
Yeah.
so I had to shove all the stuff down in the bin because the lid wasn't closing. And then I was dragging it along to the end of the drive, which is like 1 meter. And then basically his shoe flipped off my feet and like yeeted itself into the road. So then I was hopping in 1 foot with the bin down the drive.
Was this bit filmed?
Yeah,
I'd like to see
bit.
this footage.
It was kind of, at this point, you can just hear, because it was pitch black as well and rainy. And then my foot was all dirty and muddy. And anyway, so I did that, filmed myself, sent it to him. And then about an hour later, before I was going to bed, the bin had flopped itself open. So I had to go back out and
And close
shove
the
it all
bin.
down and close it again. So I was really upset. Really
Right.
upset at that. I've never done anything like it in my
No,
life.
it's tough.
It is tough.
It is tough. I think that's a very good example of psychological safety. Not at all.
No.
No.
I felt like, you know, that.
Why did you feel like you were psychologically unsafe? Was the bin going to attack you?
It was the germs.
The germs.
Yeah.
The germs made you psychologically unsafe.
Yeah.
And David put you in that position of
He
peril.
did that to me.
He did that to you. I'm so glad that at the ripe old age of 25, you've now put the bins out.
I know.
There will be people rejoicing for your growth.
It's quite a moment.
It is. Do you feel you can do it again?
Not for another
No,
year. I need to
okay.
recover.
Okay. Now that's lovely and well done. I don't
Thank
think
you.
that's psychological safety, Laura. And this herein lies the problem.
Yes.
So why don't we talk a little bit about what it actually is
Yeah.
and why people are talking about it? I think the reason it's been termed as a phrase and the reason it gets brought up is that a lot of people at work or in other environments, school, college, university, can find themselves in situations that feel psychologically unsafe, where they are. Well, I don't know whether you've got a definition in your notes that you can pull on, but where they feel that there isn't there is the presence of potential harm. Things could be harmful about this situation. And Therefore, when we don't have psychologically safe environments, we don't perform as well.
Mm.
We're less likely to speak up. We won't challenge behavior. Our ideas are less likely to be shared. We won't say, we think this is going to go wrong, because we worry that if we do, there will be a harmful outcome.
Mhm.
It's when we're inclined to have a relationship where we think, maybe with our boss or a teammate, that whenever they want to talk to us, or whenever that, we're psychologically unsafe, and we automatically assume we're in trouble,
Mm.
or we don't quite know what we're going to expect. And I've worked in situations, I've lived in situations where I've felt like I don't quite know what to expect, which means that I don't feel totally
Mm.
psychologically safe here, because on one given day you might respond like this, and on another given day you might respond in this way.
Yeah.
And that's when we start to not feel like we know how to behave, because certain behaviors are sometimes allowed and certain behaviors other days would be seen as difficult. So my basic definition would be that it's being in a situation where, not physically but psychologically, you will not come to harm
Yeah.
in a workplace.
Mm.
Now, maybe you didn't know for sure that you weren't going to come to harm with the bin.
It felt
Felt
like
like
it.
you could have fell in. You could have fell into it. In fact,
No,
that would have
that
been
I can't even
a wish
describe.
that
I'm
had
having a
happened. Yeah.
visceral
I mean, I
reaction.
wouldn't want to fall into the bin. It
No.
is a gross
It's
job, not gonna
horrible. It's
lie.
absolutely
It is
horrible.
horrible. But, I would actually, that's a good example of it being uncomfortable for you, but not unsafe.
No. No, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And one definition I have
Oh,
of
go
a
on then.
psychologically safe environment is a one that avoids shame and guilt.
You good.
So you're allowed to make mistakes
Yeah.
essentially. It prioritizes learning over knowing.
Yes.
Again, not expecting perfection,
Yeah.
just growth.
Yeah.
Um, and using negative experiences to reframe.
Mm.
So again,
Mm.
you're allowed to make mistakes, you're allowed to do things wrong. It's not used against you.
No.
And therefore you're able to relax and be yourself
Mm.
and make mistakes.
Yes. And I think when you've been in environments that don't feel psychologically safe, you can cover mistakes.
Mm.
There can be a drive for perfection. You aren't going to share the fact you don't know something. So, because if you do, it may look as lack. Whereas if you've got a learning environment, if you don't know something, you ask someone. And these can lead to big things going wrong.
Yeah.
If we work in an environment where we're covering our mistakes, we're not sharing learning, we're not asking for the help that we need. We don't challenge when we think something's wrong. In some situations, that could actually lead to life and death. So if you worked in a psychologically unsafe hospital
Mm.
and you didn't know how to do something as a
Yeah.
medical trainee, or even not just a trainee, you don't know everything when you're qualified, and you don't ask for help because you think you might get shouted at, laughed at, shamed. Somebody on the receiving end of that could end up with a poor outcome from their surgery. Or what about if you work in the airplane safety industry and you think something hasn't been done right, but again, you don't feel you can say. So it can have small consequences because we could just do something wrong or send something out an email wrong, or it could have really big consequences because that not speaking out, that desire to avoid that unsafe response that we might get, means that the outcomes aren't as good.
Mhm.
And so the reason it's in vogue in workplaces is because obviously when those things are in place, we are going to get much better outcomes. But I would say, as much as it's in vogue, there is some, really good examples at the moment of environments that are not particularly psychologically safe. Like, again, I don't want to make this a political thing, but I would imagine that currently, if you work for Trump and you're in his inner circle, I wouldn't imagine that's that psychologically safe. You don't quite know what you're going to get on any given day. Can I challenge? Can I not? What's this going to behavior be like? And so it's been profiled in, quite a one of the most high profile teams, that this is how we're going to behave. Now, the problem is people then go the other way and we make everything so lovely, lovely, nicey, nicey, that nobody challenges, nobody learns. So I reckon it would be good for us
Yeah.
today to think about, like, what is it not, and how
Mm.
can we make sure that we know really what psychological safety is, and we're not using it to avoid growth as well. Does your checklist tell you what it looks like
Yeah.
if you've got it? So why
Uh-huh.
don't we start with that so people can diagnose if they have been in or are
Yeah.
in psychologically unsafe
Yeah.
environment, because that's quite helpful because it
Mhm.
kind of expands the definition a little bit more.
So if you are in a psychologically safe environment, you will feel safe speaking up about something that's challenging.
Okay.
You see others often share dissent.
It's okay. Go again.
What's dissenting? That's bad, isn't
Dissenting.
it?
Yeah, it's when people dissent is when they disagree.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'll say that one again.
Okay.
Number two, if you see others share dissenting opinions at work,
Right.
so they're allowed to
Yeah, they're
speak up
allowed to say,
freely
I don't
and say, I
agree.
don't agree.
Hmm.
You can admit your own mistakes and your weaknesses.
Yeah.
You have candid conversations with your manager.
Hmm.
You share your failures as a way to learn and to
Mm,
grow.
mm. Pause.
Yeah.
I heard recently that we should have a failure metric at work. I read an article about it. It was saying that basically one of the things you should be measuring is how much you're failing, because if you're not failing, you're you're just not pushing hard enough. And that this guy I was talking to said that when he's talking about success rates on bids, if you're winning every single bid, you are playing it too safe. And, like, there needs to be a
Yeah.
failure element to what
Mm,
you're doing, otherwise everything you are just doing within a predictable space. So,
mm.
yeah,
That's really good.
failure should be something that we can talk about failure another day, perhaps in a bit
Yeah.
more detail. Sorry, carry on.
That you can say and hear from other people, I
Yeah.
need help,
Yes,
or
that's
I'm
I don't know,
I
help
don't
me.
know
Mm,
this. Um, that you hear reality. So along the same lines, you hear reality, not just optimism or kind
mm.
of like positive
Yeah, yeah.
thinking.
So
Um,
tough times are talked about, or this is
yeah,
gonna be
yeah,
difficult.
they talk about it. And that you can openly ask for feedback and give feedback, and that
Mm,
it's constructive
mm.
feedback. So there's some ideas of, you might be thinking, oh gosh, that's not my workplace at all. Or you might
Yeah,
be thinking, oh, I'm actually able to do all of those
yeah.
things.
Or you could also be thinking, not just your whole workplace, but perhaps you're a leader or manager
Yeah.
listening to this. Am I doing those
Mm.
things? How can I give more opportunities for those things to happen rather than just assuming they're happening? And I'm thinking about that even as a list. And I think if we were going to do anything, we would perhaps avoid sometimes talking about, I don't know, well, what do you think? What of those things would we maybe not do so well? Would you challenge me if you thought I'd got a stupid idea? I think you do. Or would you not?
I mean, you don't have any.
Ah!
No,
Yes, I do.
I do
And
feel
yes, I
like we're
do.
able to say, I mean, you are the boss, so you
Yeah,
offend,
but
but I do feel like I'm able to say, oh, maybe we could try
yeah,
this, or
and
I'm not too
you have said things
sure.
before are bad
We've said things.
ideas or
That sounds a bit.
not going to work very well.
Yeah,
I mean, you're cruel,
I'm
quite frankly.
awful.
No, no, but you have said this is not for now, or maybe we need to think about it a bit more.
Yeah,
And even those things
yeah.
are.
I
I,
think we're able
I
to.
think I guess when you're trying to build psychological safety, it is about whoever's in charge. Actually, people have voice and they feel that what they do, even if they get it really wrong, will not be, like you said, won't be
Yeah.
shamed, and mistakes are dealt with well. I do remember my old boss, one thing she used to say when I used to be in charge, the days when she wasn't there, she'd said before, which I think is really helpful. She said, if you do something today that I don't agree with, we will talk about it, but I will publicly back you.
Mm,
And we would maybe have an offline conversation around, I wouldn't have handled it this way, but she said, unless it's something that's like, I can't publicly back you for, I've done something horrendous or criminal, she would publicly back me and
mm,
support me. I have also been in situations which have felt psychologically unsafe, where I've been in staff meetings where somebody's underperformance has been publicly spoken about, or emails have been sent which are
mm.
really about individuals but sent to everybody, or copy all in with people's names on saying these people need to do that. I don't think those things breed psychological safety.
No.
So those are like low level examples
Yeah.
of the kind of behaviors that can mean that people retreat from telling the truth
Mm,
and they hide their underperformance or they don't challenge. Whereas if we create literally spaces for people to have ideas or to challenge something. I was reading in the preparation around how somebody within Kennedy's team did not challenge before the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba, and they knew what was going to go wrong, and essentially because they didn't speak up, because they weren't sure that they should, and they didn't want to seem like they were dissenting,
mm,
there was a disaster because of it. And actually, that feedback from that conversation really fed into the handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was very different. So that's a really high profile example, but we can have loads of examples from the small to the big where we think if people had said, I don't think we
yeah.
should do this, or watch out for this,
Mm,
different outcomes might happen. So psychological safety is when you feel like you can do those things. And I guess on the flip side, if you feel you can't do those things, that adds a real load to your emotional well-being
Yeah.
and your state of mind at
Mm.
work. It's going to be quite stressful. You're
Yeah.
going to be in a raised state of, cortisol and things. If you feel like any mistake you might make could be publicly reprimanded,
Mhm.
or um, I have no voice here. That is a difficult way to do everyday working life, or home life, or
Yeah.
whatever
And
place.
it probably links to moral injury as well,
Mm,
where you feel you're going against your own values or
yeah,
morals and you can't really speak out
yeah,
about it as well.
yeah. And the good news is, I think, although you really do want this to be led by your leaders, and so if you're listening to this and there are some, big bosses in your workplace and culture's really off, I still think that we can still embody this in ourselves and for the people that we have. Like your husband works for the NHS, so he works in an organisation way beyond his control, and even the hospital way beyond.
Mm.
But the interactions that he has can have psychological safety.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's going to be so much variance in
Mm.
something like a hospital
Mm.
because of the nature of the beast and people's age, background, professional ways of behaving. I mean, my son saw two surgeons recently, and his interaction with the two of them,
Yeah.
one was completely psychologically unsafe.
Mm.
Actually, it was that because Jude asked a question. He asked what a word meant, and he said, "Well, you're the university student, so you tell me." That's a
It's
very good
terrible.
example of psychologically
Yeah.
unsafe. The next surgeon, absolute psychological safety,
Mm.
full explanation, gave chance for questions. There was a dialogue, even though he was the expert, that did not make us feel stupid or shamed or anything. Whereas person number one may have been excellent at his actual job,
Mm.
but it was a completely psychologically unsafe environment. I was really quite upset when I came
Yeah,
out because
absolutely.
there was more to it than that. It was just horrible. So the variance you can have is so wild that I think we have to think we want to build cultures where we praise the
Mm.
right behaviors and we build the right behaviors and we honor the right behaviors. But if you're in a hospital or you're in that kind of situation, you are not going to, unless you are the hospital. What's the big, is it called a CEO?
Yeah, it's like a chief
Chief.
operating.
That's the COO.
Okay, maybe
But
not.
yeah,
It's
the
like a chief
chief
office.
exec,
Yeah.
chief exec,
Yeah.
the chief exec of the hospital, that's their job to try and build that culture. But that is like moving a boulder
Oh,
up a hill.
thousands of staff.
Huge
Yeah.
job. So you have to kind of think, well, I've got to do the bit I can do
Mm.
and find people like me and what can we build around us? And I say that to encourage you to not feel totally despairing
Yeah.
because I think large organizations can feel really despairing around this because there's so much more variance and so much that's out of your control in dysfunctional, broken teams with human beings in them that are complicated. You're not always going to experience this, and you're really
Mm.
fortunate if you do. So, shall I just quickly go through what it is not?
Yeah.
And then you can ask me
I'm
what
going to
you want
ask
to
you
ask.
some
Okay, so let's do
questions.
that. I found a really good article by Amy Edmondson and Michaela Carisi, and I'm just going to pick a couple of points out of this. And this is about what we think psychological safety is that it isn't. So I'm just going to run through these misconceptions really quickly. Okay. So the first thing about psychological safety that it is not is psychological safety does not mean being nice. Now, nice is not the same as kindness. So we can be kind and we can be compassionate, but nice is when you might hear someone say, "Oh, we never argue as a team. We never disagree." Actually, a psychologically safe team, family, environment will disagree. Actually, psychological safety looks like modeling doing that well.
Mm.
Um, Sidebar, I had parents that argued a lot, not very well, like in a dysfunctional way. Sam had parents that never exhibited an argument in front of them. So he thought when people argued, it was a really, really
End
big
of the
deal.
world. Yeah.
So neither of those things are what psychological safety
Mm.
looks like. Because one looked like we won't show that bit because
Mm.
it's a bit uncomfortable. In my experience, love them very much, but I saw that happen in a way that was not good. So there is a place which is actually we can argue, we can disagree, we can feel differently about things. And that means a safety between us because we don't feel the same and it doesn't threaten our relationship with each other. So sometimes people in teams think, well, I'm in a safe team because we don't argue. Actually, I've watched some really, really effective teams disagree. I've
Mm.
seen some, meaty, difficult conversations take place and thought, gosh, that was really robust. But actually, it was kind
Mm.
and honoring even though it wasn't nicey, right?
Yeah.
And that goes back to my point about the Kennedy example
Yeah.
as well. You know, you've got to be able to say, I don't agree with you. I think this is going to go wrong. Now, ultimately, someone has to make that decision. Next misconception. Do you want to say anything about that?
No, I've got a question related to it that
Okay.
I'll come to.
Okay, fine. Number two, psychological safety does not mean getting your own way. So sometimes
Mm.
people think that if a situation is psychologically safe, they must get what they want. You know, I want to change my working hours. I want my idea to get pushed through. You didn't support me. I want to be able to work from home. I want to be able to do whatever it might be. When somebody says no, you can't do that, that doesn't mean that it's psychologically unsafe. And I think that's a really important one. It's so easy for us to see pushback or no, that's not what we're doing. We're not going with your idea, as that meant I wasn't safe to share it. I've seen this happen sometimes where there's always been a reluctance from leaders to let people give their ideas, because then when those ideas haven't been progressed, people have been really affronted by that and said, well, what's the point in me sharing an idea if you're not going to take it? I mean, that's ridiculous, because that then means that every idea people have must be must happen, or every thought, so everything people want. You can consult and still not make that decision.
Mm.
And I think there's a misunderstanding. I see that happen a lot. There's got to be good communication back to say, this is why we've not gone with what you wanted. But ultimately, you can't always get what you want. And psychological safety. Why did we choose a topic involving a word I can't say? That was such a good idea. Psychological safety, with all the love in the world, does not mean we're always going to get what we want.
That's a shame.
I know. What were you going to ask me for?
Well, I don't feel very psychologically safe because I wanted like
What did you want?
I'm trying
Double
to
holiday?
double holiday, Greg's every day for
Yeah. And
lunch,
hot chocolates all
and
day long.
oh yeah,
No, sorry,
absolutely.
not going to happen. But you are still
No,
psychologically
I
safe.
am. I
You
am.
are, I promise you. But we can talk about a compromise on that. You
Mhm.
can bring a Greg's on a Monday. How about that? Psychological safety does not mean your job will be secure forever. Things can go wrong. You talked about that. There's tough times.
Mm.
There may be moments of job insecurity or conversations about jobs being made redundant. That can be done in a psychologically safe way, even though it's a difficult thing. And I think there's a difference between safety and comfort, which I thought this article covered really
Mm.
well. Safety is not going to be harmed. Comfort is I won't feel uncomfortable. If you share that you don't agree with something that the rest of the team thinks, you might feel uncomfortable and that might be hard. Yesterday, I was in a team meeting, there was some really difficult conversations. That discomfort does not mean people were not safe.
Mm.
And I think we've got to hear the difference. And that's quite challenging, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we've had a couple of those conversations where we've had to
Mm.
talk about things and we're like, this feels like a big thing to talk about. And it was uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but it was safe
Yeah.
because I wasn't going to shout or punch you.
Thank
I
you.
know, it's a relief. Or you me, I hope.
No.
You might do. Psychological safety does not mean that you need to have a trade off with performance. In fact, data suggests that you're going to have really high performance because mistakes are called out, learning happens. Um, we talk about what we could have done better. Really good feedback, radical candor is given to people about how they could have done things better. So, actually, if people feel safe to try things that they couldn't do, or be on that learning curve, you're going to increase performance actually if you do it properly, because it's not about being nice, which was the first misconception. It's not a policy that you can just bring in and say, this is how we're going to do it. It's about modeling and it's about messaging. And it isn't just about the leaders. And I've said that already. It is not just top down. Like I said, you can be empowered to do this, even if your leaders are not. I think sometimes you have to just do what you can, do the bit in front of you, do what you are able to create in your space. Go on, ask me a couple of questions then.
So I just want to draw on your wisdom
Oh
because
gosh,
you're
no
asked to come
pressure.
into corporate organizations
Yeah.
and yeah, groups all the time and speak to their leaders and teams about
Mm,
this exact stuff. And from your
mm.
experience, for anyone listening who's thinking, if I was just a bit more confident or a bit more resilient, I'd be able to cope. If they are in a psychologically
Unsafe.
unsafe, what would you say to them if they're putting a lot of the blame on themselves and
Mm.
thinking, well, everyone else is
Yeah.
coping?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Some people will be more sensitive to a psychologically unsafe place than others. And I think we have to just perhaps just recognize that. Some people will just be more inclined to think, well, this is just a job. I don't really care what people think.
Mm.
I'm just going to crack on. And not all of us can do that. Some of us are more sensitive to our emotions. We're more sensitive to a crossing of our values.
Mm.
We're more sensitive to feeling like this does not feel ethically right. So it's going to discombobulate us more than others. So I think, first of all, recognize that that is a strength in you rather than a weakness, but that it will come with downfalls for you, that you will feel that more than
Mm.
others.
Mm.
And then I would say, focus on something that you can start to be 10% braver in, because I don't think anything that we are is a set point. We can still grow. If you feel like you're in a team meeting, you often find it really jarring and difficult. What would it look like for you in that situation to be 10% braver, rather than thinking I've got to become somebody that I'm not and pretend this doesn't bother me? So that's kind of what I would
Yeah.
say in a nutshell.
And kind of off the back of that, what would you say to someone? My chin just bounced off the microphone. Off the back of that, what would
Yes.
you say to someone who needs to reconnect with themselves and their strengths if they're in this sort of environment and they don't feel very valued, they don't feel like they can be themselves? How are you able to cope in an environment like that?
Gosh, and how do they keep sort of finding it within themselves, remember who they
Yeah.
are? That's really, really good. I think there's a couple of things. I'd say look for the allies. There's likely to be some. There are going to be people that are going to be closer to the kind of colleague. I had a colleague in my previous workplace who was the most psychologically safe colleague I could ask for. There were things about our environment that were not, but she was an ally and I
Mm.
would go to her. So I would think about finding those people. I would also say do some work on looking at your strengths again and reacquainting yourself with yourself. I have a course and a book called The Purpose Pursuit, which is all about doing that. Some people cannot leave their environments they're in, but they can re enter them with a renewed focus and an understanding of what they bring to that. And I would definitely say doing some work on understanding your strengths. Start the day with a little bit of reminder of that, or think about what's coming ahead of you in the day and what's going to be particularly difficult, and how do you prepare. Do not go into what you think is going to be really difficult completely without preparation. I remember going into something once where I thought it was a very simple I thought I was completely off guarded for what it was like,
Mm.
and I regretted the fact I was so unprepared emotionally and unprepared mentally for what I was about to encounter. So I think if you know there is a likelihood for it, do a bit of preparation work. Think about how you can go in with a little bit of like armor on. I don't mean defensiveness, but like looking after yourself, so that you enter those environments and learn how you can respond and advocate for yourself without being rude or without having expectations that are unrealistic of that particular individual.
That's really good. And how can someone assess if their workplace is able to change, or if the
Mm.
culture is so baked into it
Yeah.
that nothing will ever change? And how can they decide whether to leave or
It's
stay?
really difficult and really big and situation by situation. It's literally somebody I was talking to this last week who's
Mm.
in that, I've got to decide whether this is make or break. I think you have to put some parameters in place, maybe put some tests out there as to how certain conversations go. Are people open to growth and change? Do you have anybody with some agency, depending on what your role is, that you can speak to about this and see where it goes? Do you feel like, off the back of some perhaps open and robust conversation, progress is made or not? I witnessed something the other day where there was definitely progress made on what looked previously like a no growth scenario. Or is there a time frame that you can give it and then say, I'm going to give it till then, and if I
Mm.
don't see any progress and I've also done my best, I have to then recognize this is not going to change, and I need to begin the process of looking elsewhere.
Mm.
But I think you have to try a few different things before you decide. I suppose I'm generally quite optimistic that people can change. It's quite interesting. I was talking to my dad on the phone about something the other day, and he was asking me about the work I'd been doing. And he said, "Oh, how old is that person?" I said, "Oh, they're in their 40s." And he said, "Oh, unlikely to probably change anymore now." And I said, "Oh, I don't know." I said, "I think they can. I really do think people can." And that is to do with that person, to do with the quality of the feedback they've been given. What if somebody's never told them
Mm.
how much of an impact they're having? So maybe that might be part of your responsibility to do that in in if you feel you can. Now, I don't want to push people to do things they don't feel they can, and sometimes out is the most important. Others of you will feel a sense of actually I need to be part of the solution. I can think of another example of somebody who's worked their way through the ranks. They're now really senior in an organization and they have done so much to change the culture that when they were much like lower down in the organization, they were on the receiving end of. And as they've received opportunities for promotion, they've been instrumental in using that leadership position in changing culture. And again, you find your allies to do that. And you don't, if you have some level of autonomy or power over a certain team, you do not allow those behaviors to go unchecked because that's the problem
Mm.
if they are.
Two more
Go on
questions.
then.
Um, what have you noticed in your experience of teams that are psychologically safe and high performing?
Mm.
What do they do differently? Are there any patterns?
They spend time with each other. That's one thing. They are able to both praise each other and give critical feedback. They are not defensive. They are unguarded. They are able to see the value that the other people in the team bring without it being a threat to them and their position. They are comfortable in what they contribute and don't need to belittle somebody else's
Mm.
contribution and recognize they are interdependently in need of one another in order to perform. And that can be a team of leaders or any sort of team within it. But when I see those things, they also have fun, to a level as well, and everything's not
Yeah.
really intense. But when you see those things, and there is a level of trust and honesty, trust comes only by giving it away a little bit. There is no other way to trust.
Yeah.
And trust could be let down. You could do that, and somebody really not. You cannot give trust. The literal meaning of the word is such that there is an element of faith in that process and you have to choose to go there. So it means they've chosen to be a little bit more vulnerable than they would perhaps otherwise. And that's grown trust. And they've built upon that foundation to be able to do those other things. You can't do those other things if trust isn't there underneath.
Mm. And finally,
Hmm.
for someone who's listening and feels really isolated in their organisation right now and is listening to you and going, oh my word, that's me, what would you say to them? And what would you say to a leader who feels that they could grow in this area or they want to work in this area?
If you're a leader and you want to grow in this area, I think one of the best things you could do is to think about getting some feedback. Maybe go through a 360 process. Get somebody to do that for you. To actually select some of your team and colleagues and people you report to. Get some really robust feedback and use that data to then pick some things to work on and make a plan. If you feel you could grow, you don't have to be, a raging sociopath to improve in psychological safety. I could definitely improve in this area. So get the feedback if you feel like you're unsure. And the other one was about somebody feeling alone
Yeah.
in their workplace. I think I would encourage you to first of all, I say I'm really sorry you're having to work in that situation. And I would encourage you to seek out support in some way, shape, or form, whether that's getting in touch with us, whether it's finding that ally. I think it is about beginning to say, I need some support in this so that I can begin to find a way through. Don't feel like you've got to do anything rash. And look for the people, whoever they might be, as I said before, who could be allies, who are seeing things the way you are, not to create a little enclave of misery and moaning, but to be like in fact, quickly, I had another colleague in a previous workplace, and we could tell the place had got very miserable and very moany, and that was creating a type of psychological unsafety. There was just a moaning culture, a negativity, and we kind of found each other. Her name's Amy. She might be listening. She listens sometimes. And together we decided we were going to do something about that. We had no particular power or agency to do this, but we just did. And we did something every day for a week where we did like acts of kindness and positivity. We filled the staff room with balloons one day. Another day we put chocolate in everybody's letter pigeonholes. You will have no idea though the difference those little
Yeah.
things made.
Can you
You
do that here?
Yeah, I think we should. We played Uno the other
Yeah,
day.
we
That was my act
did.
of psychological
And you beat
safety.
me,
I did. I
so.
beat you. Ha ha. And I played later that day and won again. Yeah.
Really? That's impressive.
Thank you. But we just thought, what can we do? Rather,
Mm,
I couldn't completely change the culture and start reprimanding people for moaning because that wasn't my job. But what did it look like for us to do something
mm,
completely opposite to the culture we were seeing? And people loved it. We played music when people came into work another day. I led staff briefing in a different way one of the days, and we just put a little bit of thought behind it to try and shift the gear a little bit.
mm.
So let that little story encourage you that little things can make a
Yeah,
difference, and you do make a difference in your workplace. Um, Find your allies, give yourself a bit of a pep talk every day, and go for it. Thanks for listening.